Hi, it's John from Crafts by John UK. Today's card is a very bespoke custom card with lots of text. Now, this is a conundrum for many card makers. How do I cope when they want lots and lots of weird and wonderful text that I just don't have any pre-made stamps for? The risk of stamping individually and screwing it up is too great. There's a way of doing it: printing and enhancing. And if you're interested how I've done it, stay tuned and I'll show you. So to start, I have created all the text I need, and I've done this on PowerPoint. So I've got a template that I've created myself, and I've used that template to create all the text using a different text font. So the first thing to do, once you've printed it out and let it dry, and this is printed on 300 GSM cardstock because I'm also going to be inking it. The first thing to do is to cut that down to size. So my template for my 7 by 5 inch card is a little bit bigger than an actual 7 by 5 normal base, so I just cut a little bit of the excess off. But you can see I've got text all the way down the right hand side on this card. This would be impossible to achieve with stamps and individually stamping each letter. Way too risky. It's going to go wrong. You just know it's going to be a disaster. If you want it to look professional, printing like this is a good way of doing it. What I've also then done, you can see I've done like a headline text, and I've done this in white on a black background, but similarly I'm going to cut this down and then I actually colour it and enhance it as well. We don't want it to look too printed because it looks like some kind of cheat, but we want it to look professional, we want to be able to read the text, and we want to have all the text that we want. So this is a good way of achieving that. I use PowerPoint, you can use WordPress, you could use Word. There's various different software packages you could use. All you need basically is some kind of a laptop or MacBook, a program that you can do your text on. You could do it on a mobile phone if it came to it, I suppose. And then some kind of a printer that will print on cardstock or decent weight paper, because if you're going to enhance it with inks and others, you need to be printing on something half decent. Also, a straight through printer. Mine is the Canon TS6350. That's a great printer. It's got a rear feed and it takes cardboard all the way through from front to back, which is great. So you can see I've just cut that down, trimmed it down, and basically I'm going to lay that text across the top in the black panel, and then the text down the right hand side is already printed. And then I'm going to use this gamer stamp. It's a Stamping Bella figure, and it's got a really fun sentiment that says something like eat, sleep, game, repeat, and it's for somebody who's clearly addicted to gaming. But I'm going to actually stamp it on top of the panel I've printed, and then I'm going to colour it in with my pro markers. So just a kind of reverse way of doing stuff. We normally start with our stamped image and enhance. In a scenario like this where you're working with a lot of predetermined text, it's easier to print and then add the stamping to it. Obviously, you've got to be careful, you've got to make sure you get that right. So something to bear in mind, but you're working with the panel that you're going to ultimately end up with the whole way through. You're not going to cut anything out, you're just adding on to the panel. So it's layering up, but it's kind of in the reverse order. So you can see here I've got my stamp. This is a rubber stamp, so it's a little bit thicker than normal. Kind of laying it out on my stamping platform there and just working out where it's going to go, leaving obviously enough space for that whole piece of text that's going to sit at the top. So I'm just using my anti-static mat there, and then I'm inking up the figure. Obviously I've sped this up so that it's not too long, but you can kind of get the process. So I'm just inking him down. I've got him in the position I want him, and then I'm just using my tool to press him down basically to make sure I get a good impression. So I'm also going to emboss him with clear ultrafine wow, because I'm going to be colouring him in. That gives me a nice glossy finish. It also lifts the ink slightly, so I've got an edge to colour up to. You can't afford to make any mistakes on this one, obviously, because it's on the printed back panel, so you've got to be a little bit more careful than normal. I'm usually quite cavalier when it comes to card making, but when you're working in an environment like this, you've got to be a little bit more careful, because if you screw up that panel, you've screwed up the whole card, because obviously you've got to start again and print it all out again. So just try and be a little bit more careful than normal. So give him a good heat, and then I'm just going to give him a clean with my water and my cloth. Basically, this is a great stamp. I've used this quite often for teenage boy gamer cards. I've sold these on Etsy and eBay. It's a very useful stamp, and Stamping Bella do make some great funny quirky characters like that. You can see that there, Oddball Gamer it's called. Right, just move my platform out of the way, and then we've now got our card base with our text, and we've got our stamped image, which is good. So Next thing to do really is to grab pens and get colouring, I think. So I just noticed there was a little bit of a dirty mark on the side there. I don't quite know how I did that. I think it was probably from my black ink, which needs a good clean around. So I'm just checking out the placement there. I'm going to put that on the wonk. Obviously, the most basic thing to do would put it and center it and line it up, but for that reason I'm going to put it on the wonk because it's for a quirky kind of character. This is my friend Stuart, whose 30th birthday it is. Now I've moved the camera down there just a little bit closer so you can see the colouring. I'm hoping that as I'm colouring it's not going to cause it to go out of focus too much, but that is the only trouble when you're trying to film something like this. It constantly focuses in on the pen and not what you're actually doing with it. So I'm just starting off with my Pro markers, and I'm using Pro markers this time because I just want a kind of a flat bright colour. I don't want to create a realistic look. I just want to get basic, almost cartoon kind of anime quality to it. So just colouring the face there and the hands, and then I'm going in with a slightly darker shade just to give a little bit of highlight around the eyes and also probably around the hairline as well. I don't want it to be textured to try and look realistic, but I want you to notice the things like eyelids, etc., that would be a slightly different colour. I'm going in with my blue and I'm just doing a little bit around the actual iris, and then I'll use, I think, a blender, just to blend that out a little bit towards the edge. And that gives us a good eye effect. These quirky characters are quite cute with their kind of odd and mismatched eyes. And then I go back in again with the blue just to highlight that again. You can see how quickly it is and how quickly it builds up when you're doing this colouring. How easy it is to kind of take something that's just a black and white image and make it look quite good. So the hair, I decided to do different shades of brown. This is supposed to be my friend Stuart, who has kind of messy brown hair. So I decided not to colour anything flat. I'm just going to do kind of highlights with lots of different shades of brown. Create that overall finished look. So I've just taken a handful of kind of different browns basically, and I'm just sort of doing quirky, odd, spiky hair basically. Just layering it. If you colour the whole thing flat, it immediately just flattens it basically. Whereas if you keep going and kind of highlighting, also using the other end of the pen as well. I'm obviously using the kind of brush end, but you can also use the square end, and that gives you a kind of a more jagged, squarer effect. You can see I'm doing it there. Don't forget these pens have two different ends. A lot of people just get used to using one or not the other, and then you'll find that one will run out and the other one's got loads of ink. So just keep playing basically. I went for a kind of limey green coloured t-shirt, and then this is kind of like a leather jacket, it looks like, and I always never know quite how to colour this in really, but I think this time I decided to do it in grey. So I started with the lapels and then kind of worked my way around the rest of the jacket basically. You can see we've got all these boots as well, great big boots. They're quite easy. I mean, this whole character is very easy to colour, and it always looks really effective when you do it. It's quite an interesting character with the thin legs, etc. It's quite quirky, and it always looks quite nice when it's finished, so it's good. But yeah, it's a very versatile stamp for this kind of thing. So I went with a sort of shale colour for the jacket, which was quite a not normal choice, I guess. Not exactly the way I'd colour this normally, but I decided to go for slightly different colours this time. He's got quite thin arms as well as his legs. So I just kind of coloured him in, and I just thought, yeah, I quite like the collar being a lighter colour than the jacket. I went slightly over the edge there, and rather than risk trying to push that back in with the blender, I actually just thickened the black line on the arm a little bit there. That was me in my haste. But this style of stamp, you can kind of do that. If you screw something up, you can always just thicken one of the outer lines and it will fix it. Decided to do a kind of jeans effect on the legs, so went for a kind of a mid blue. This one actually came out a little bit brighter than I'd probably really intended, but kind of looks still okay. And then I just went over it with another blue over the top just to kind of layer it a little bit. You can see how quickly that came together. There's not that many elements here to colour, which is quite good. Apologies, I'm slightly off the screen there, but this is basically putting some grey onto the console, And again, because it's got that central circular panel and an edge, it's easy to colour one in one colour and another in another, and that immediately gives it depth. So even though we're going for quite a flat kind of anime look, just colouring it like that will give it a bit of life, basically. Apologies, I kind of not realised I was off the camera here. You can see I'm just layering bits and pieces on the console, I think, and just blobs on buttons and things like that, reds and greens and blues, just to kind of bring it to life. Sorry about this, it's not the most interesting video and you can't actually see what I'm doing. And all while I'm doing this, I'm thinking, right, what am I going to do with the rest of this card? Because I definitely wanted to do something to bring it to life. And I quite like that lime green on the t-shirt. And I thought, I think there's our colour, basically. Right, I'm just pulling the camera out again now so you can see the overall. So kind of finished colouring him. He's pretty much coloured. Apologies, took a little while to get the camera in the right place. My mount had actually come out of the wall and I've ended up having to re-screw it into the wall. But there you go. So you can see back again now. We've got him coloured. I did actually go around and just darken just around the face a little bit as well, again. But we've got our main image coloured, and obviously we've got our key text there, which is good. Achieving that via any other method would have been really time consuming and really difficult. Here we go, so I've just darkened the face a little bit. But that's pretty much it, I think, for him. Now, I've got my ink sponges now, and I'm looking for a nice green. There we go. So I found my green, and what I'm going to do is I've decided I'm just going to go around the edges with green. I like that lime green in the shirt, and that kind of Xbox is a green colour. There's a green associated with gaming, so I've picked a couple of different colours: cracked pistachio, lucky clover, and I'm going to go around and do it in 2 layers. So the first thing I do is ink the edge. So I'm just literally inking the edge. Then I'm bringing the ink slightly onto the card. By doing the edge first, you get rid of most of the ink off the sponge. And then when you ink the actual card, you've got less ink, less risk of getting a big round blob, which is what we don't want. But more so, it just lays down a kind of a little layer. I decided to come up there a little bit between the text and the character, just to kind of pull a little bit of interest in there. And then in the corners, I also come up a little bit more as well, just to kind of fill in some of the gap. And this is a layering process. Don't forget, you can always add. It's much more difficult to take away. And again, we've already committed. We've got our text, we've got our character, we've coloured it. We really don't want to screw it up at this point. So this is a good time to be a little bit cautious with what you're doing. So I've very gently and gingerly there just inked that green. I now grab this stamp. Now this is a stamp by Unico. It's a company I've not discovered that long ago, but I love their stuff. They do some really modern, funky stencils and stamps, etc. And I'm loving this one. It's kind of like a technology. It's got all sorts of weird and wonderful shapes. And I just thought this will work really well on that edge. So what I've done is I've then got the other colour green, which is the lucky clover. And I'm just kind of very lightly going over the stencil, just daubing on some of those circles and bars, basically. You can see it's kind of creating almost like a circuit board effect. So I was really glad I spotted this in my pile because I thought that just adds a bit more interest to it. It's nice to have something creeping in the edge, but it's always just a case of finding something that's relevant or even looks, mildly connected to what you're doing. And I just thought, gaming, computers, technology, kind of works. But again, I've done it quite lightly. And then to finish off, I'm just going to go round the edges with the lucky clover, just to bring that darker green right onto the edge. But obviously leaving the lighter green as the one that kind of filters onto the card. And then similarly, I've grabbed my piece at the top. You can see the black. I've gone round the edges with the clover, the darker green. And then I'm actually going over the white text on the black background with the clover. Now, because it's Distress Oxide, it will make the black slightly chalky, but it's making the white green, which is really cool because that ties it into everything else on the card, basically. So, and this is the thing, we're trying to create a cohesive look where everything kind of works together. I'm going to clean that working area because I don't want to risk getting any green onto my card before I kind of finish it off. But the first thing I decided to do then was back that black panel as well. So I'm using the lucky clover with just a piece of scrap card, basically, just to make a panel for the back of that. I want to put that on there just so that it's not against the background of the card. You see, giving it just a little thin green border makes a big difference. So I'm cleaning up now. I'll finish with most of my inking. So clean your stencils as you go. It's always a good idea to clean them before you put them away. Always clean the front and the back. I'm going to have fun with this stencil. I love it. So that's a good one. And then we just need to cut that panel to size basically. So we will use double-sided sticky tape because we've got to get it stuck down. I could have used glue, but there's always that slight risk of it warping. So I use double-sided just to be safe. And I'm just going to stick that back down to the green panel. It's just nice to have that same green poking out from underneath. It kind of starts tying everything together. You've got the Lucky Clover panel around what was black, and obviously that ties in with the stencil and the edge of the base of the card. It's just reinforcing those same colour choices and reinforcing the message. Okay, so I'm just dotting that down by eye, basically. And then I'm just going to cut those two panels down, or two sides down that aren't correct. So with my ruler, which is a foam backed one, so it's got a little bit of a lift to it, it's quite good for holding down smaller pieces of paper so they don't move. You can just cut that down quite quickly and easily. And you see how much more effective that looks just with that green panel around it. So now when we lay that on top, look at that, works a treat. Matches in with the technology stenciling, matches in with the edging. Now I did actually decide to glue this. It was because it's two layers of paper. It's quite thick, it's quite heavy, it's not going to buckle, and it's just a little bit quicker than using double-sided tape. So I picked that up with my tweezers because I'm quite careful like that. Being a man, I'm quite ham-fisted. Piece of scrap paper. This was a competition I actually did for work. Just flattening that down, making sure it's fully level, and then just a piece of kitchen towel just in case any glue escapes from underneath, although it is clear glue, so that would it wouldn't be the end of the world anyway. There we go. You can see how nicely that looks, and the text just looks really professional. None of this bodged stamping with letters that have been over stamped and they're too thick, or different quality, not in line. It's just way too much risk, if you ask me. It just doesn't look professional when you do that, so that's why I made the choice to print it out, and I think it looks fine. I think printing stuff, as long as you enhance it and tie it in with the rest of the card, I think it's perfectly valid in card making for like a professional effect. There we go. So that's our main panel. All we need to do now is get a 7x5 card blank and stick this down. I could have edged this in black, and I kind of thought about it for a moment, but then I thought the black above, I've kind of gone over it with that green, so I don't think black would really work. So I decided at that point, I think I'm going to do it in green. I thought it just needed a darker edge. So I decided to do green. I just found some like a mid-green colour that kind of matched the Lucky Clover green, basically. And again, apologies, this is off the top of the screen now. I'm all over the place today. Basically, you sat that down, so it's just got a very thin kind of clover green border around it. Cards always look better if the panel at the back is dark, basically. If it's light on white, somehow it just seems to lose it a little bit. So it's quite common to put a darker layer underneath. Just cutting that down, as you can see. And then again, with the double-sided tape, sticking it down to a 7x5 card blank. I actually made this card in about, I think it took me about 40 minutes, and I made it in the 40 minutes before we went to the party that was where it was given. So that was hilarious, really. Talk about cutting it fine, but when you're a card maker, you know how quickly it takes you to do stuff, so kind of work with what you've got. And he actually loved the card so much, it's on his desk, he sits and looks at it all day while he's working, he said. It's quite funny. Right, so I'm just peeling the tapes off, bit of bunny ears going on so that I can jiggle it around. But you see, look how nice that looks now with that dark green border around it. So I'm just getting that in the right place. Apologies, slightly off the top of the screen there, but you can see, then pulling the tapes to stick it down, and I'll just go around the edges with a bone folder as well. Any cut edge, you should always go around with the bone folder just to flatten down any raised surface. There we go. There we go, there's the finished card. You can see it looks quite nice. The text is clear. It says, yes, he still plays like a child, but will never fit in those t-shirts he's kept since he was 12. This is an ongoing joke with him and his partner. She jokes at the fact that he's kept all his t-shirts since he was 12 years old, despite the fact he's never going to fit in them. But apparently they all have real sentimental value. So that was the joke. Happy 30th birthday, Stuart. And you can see we've got our little gaming figure there, which we've stamped. That's a Stamping Bella image. We've coloured that in with our Winsor & Newton Pro markers. Nice vibrant colour. We've used a Unico stencil to create the sort of sticks and balls, which is kind of like giving it a technology feel, because it's all about gaming and it's all about the inner child. So that's our card. And this just goes to show you can use printed sentiments, really handy for all that text that's too difficult that you don't have a stamp for. But by blending it, inking it, stenciling it, you can make it a cohesive part of any overall card look. So hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, please give me a thumbs up, like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll catch you next time.